And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie. School's in, bitches.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. We've got a big show this week. We are going to obviously cover the news and notes as we usually do. We've got a new segment called the Nuttiest Gangster Ever. Also followed by Scumbag of the Week, which the last two times I think I've forgotten to do it. So we're going to do it this week. We're going to do a large Q&A. And then we're going to talk about the St. Valentines Day Massacre. And we're going to talk about it from the extent of everything that was going on, from the political aspects to the street stuff that was going on, and what led to Al Capone finally just saying, enough of this bullshit, let's kill everybody. And that's exactly what they would end up doing. But the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to jump in to really, there's a lot of news going on, but this is sort of imperative to discuss. So basically the other day, I believe it was like probably 4 or 5 days ago, 91 were arrested in Sicily, and basically I wanted to pretty much, and I covered this over on the blog, so what I'm going to essentially do here is I'm going to read the article that I posted on the blog. It just goes to show that Italian authorities are getting a little innovative and how they're trying to dismantle the mob. And obviously we know over in Italy what's been going on with COVID-19 and everything else. That the one way that they have been able to dismantle the mob over in Italy is by following the money and seizing assets. That's something that the United States government really doesn't do. The feds stand by the fucking RICO law, which should be a criminal fucking law to begin with, the way that they conduct themselves with the RICO law. But Italian authorities really don't use the RICO law. And I know that if you go back into the early or mid 80s, I know that American authorities were trying to talk to the Italian authorities into sort of reenacting or enacting the RICO law there. But the Italians really haven't done that. And so what they've done is something a little bit different. So anyway, in Palermo, Sicily, Italian authorities arrested some 91 members of Cosa Nostra. In an indictment which has been unsealed, 91 members of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra were arrested for money laundering and extortion. The probe, which was pretty wide in scale, was specifically designed to remove the mob from making money during the global pandemic. Hundreds of officers spanned out all across Palermo and several other little towns in northern Italy to make the arrests. It's the contention of the Italian police that the mob was basically laundering money and extorting and using narcotics trafficking finances in an effort to buy up a ton of businesses struggling to make ends meet during this pandemic. According to the police, mobsters were attempting to buy hotels, pharmacies, bars, car dealerships, and a dozen or so other businesses. Listen, it's nothing new to the Italian authorities because the mob has been doing this since the early 1990s in Italy specifically, and they're always looking for ways to wash their illicit money into legitimate enterprises. But how they go about buying these businesses is what the Italian authorities wanted to focus on. But like I said, with this pandemic, the government's just seen enough. And according to what I am seeing, they pretty much dropped the hammer. One of the biggest fears that the Italian authorities have is that 'Ndrangheta, which is a Calabrian-based criminal organization, has been recruiting soldiers who own businesses who are losing everything due to the ramifications of the pandemic. While the mob has pretty much, and it's been publicly noted that the citizens are really being taken care of by the mob's been feeding them, giving them money. The government just isn't going to tolerate any move by Cosa Nostra or 'Ndrangheta to take over the entire country. And that's essentially what is happening. It's a brazen move by the Italian government. Prior to the arrest warrants being handed down, the Italian government began to lock up assets that were controlled by the mob. It's been one of the ways the Italian government has been able to shut down the mafia in Italy. Other sort of legal ramifications have not worked, and they find that if they cut off the financial supply, or if they follow the money and they seize assets, then they can cripple the mob. Or at least paint them in a corner to where they can get the upper hand. The government seized $16.5 million in assets late Monday night. It included homes, 13 racing horses, illegal betting parlors, bars, and restaurants. While it remains to be seen how this is all going to play out in the longevity of all this, the one success that the Italian authorities have had in dismantling the mafia is by basically following the money. It's a money trail. And they're also willing to do things like remove children from the homes of alleged gangsters to hammer the point home that if you are going to conduct yourself in a criminal manner, if you are going to break the laws, if you're going to be in the mob, we're just going to take your fucking kids from you and we're going to put them into fucking orphanages or for adoption. And that's really the one way the Italian authorities have been able to sort of thwart the mob in Italy. It's not a foolproof plan, obviously. But listen, you got to understand one thing. Italy is very different than the United States because over there, they're not afraid to whack fucking politicians. They're not afraid to whack judges. They're not afraid to whack fucking cops to make a point. They've been doing it for a long time, and I don't think they're ever going to stop. And so while you're never really going to eradicate the mafia in Italy, this really seems to be the one system in place that the entire government is using that is sort of working. We can argue the moral implications of taking somebody's kids away from them, but that's just what they've done. Now, why the American law enforcement doesn't do this, I'm not really sure. I think that, and maybe I'm speaking too far, but I think, and I'm not in any way trying to like defame Italian citizens, but I think the American mob is structured in a way that they're able to hide money a lot differently. I don't know if, and I'm just speaking off the top of my head here, I don't even know if there are laws over there like here, a wife cannot impugn her husband. So if the courts drag a wife into court, they cannot force her to testify against her husband. I don't think that Italy has those same laws. So there are some differences. Also, you have to understand something too about Italy. Is that you're not just dealing with Cosa Nostra and 'Ndrangheta, you're dealing with subclans of subclans of subclans. So it's you're not just dealing with, whereas over here, you have like the Gambino crime family, the Genovese crime family, the Philadelphia Mafia. You have all of these families, right? But in Italy, it's different because you just don't have like the fucking Capone crime family. You may have the Capone crime family, but there's 80 other mob families around them. So really the difference between Italy and the United States is if you go after the hierarchy of the Genovese crime family, you can systematically, you will never eradicate them, but you can dismantle the hierarchy and force them to make other decisions. In Italy, it doesn't work that way. You might just take a clan out, but there's 75 other clans that are around that aren't going to get taken out. And I think the willingness of the Italian mafia in Italy to kill anybody who gets in their fucking way really is a lot different than the way things run here in the States. And that's exactly why I don't think that even with the Italian authorities seizing bank assets, going after children, I don't think they're ever going to have the firm grip that they think they're going to have, but they're at least trying something out of the box that's a little bit different. I don't think the RICO laws would work there because if they're willing to kill prosecutors, that's a fucking game changer. Here, when Rudy Giuliani fucking did his shit, maybe guys said, oh, we should kill this prick, but in reality, nobody's really going to do that. Over in Italy, it's a little bit different. They'll blow up a whole fucking freeway to kill a motherfucker. So I think the reality is they're a much more violent group and they're much more dedicated to the cause. Not saying that the American mafia is not dedicated to the cause. I just think there's a big gap in between what criminal factions are going to be willing to do. So that's what's going on over there. We'll see how that all plays out. So there's two other things I wanted to talk about. The first one is Tekashi 6ix9ine. First of all, I don't like the kid. I never have. I don't understand his music. I don't listen to his music. So I cannot speak from a fucking educated level whether he's a good musical artist or not. However, I did come across something where he had 130 million fucking views on this new video on YouTube. So what I did was I went and I listened. First of all, I didn't understand a fucking word this kid was saying, but then I noticed something else. The kid's a fucking rat. People will try to spin that in a million different fucking kind of ways. Can you separate an artist from something they do? Sure, you could do that, but I think that what is really, really interesting about this is not only is he a rat, but he's coming out and making fun of it and throwing shade in people's face. He's proud of what he did. He doesn't give a fuck about what he did. And that's some brazen shit. And I think the hip hop community, not that I could speak for them, they don't like it. You're going to have some artists that will work with him because he gets attention. He makes money. There's no, there's no doubting that people like his bullshit. Okay. But I have never in my life ever seen somebody from the hip hop community who has done this come right out and get 127 million views. That's 127 million people that like his bullshit, that can accept what he did. Now, maybe not all of them. Maybe a lot of it's just people want to go. They want to see what it's all about. But this guy superimposed a fucking animation of a rat head laughing. And the reality is he's going to get killed. I've seen a lot of people talking about him saying, oh, he's a federal informant. Nobody's going to go after him. I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong. I think there may be some that are going to argue that it's a smart move being so public because he's so well known, people might not take a chance. But I think a lot of people and I read through probably 200 comments of these fucking people on YouTube, and it's disgusting. There's no morals anymore. There's no standards. There are no fucking standards. Now, I don't expect an average Joe to have a fucking street standard. I really don't, because they're hardworking people. They don't give a shit about the streets. I get it. But the whole thing is this punk brat bastard used the Train 9 Bloods to up his fucking profile. He wanted to be a tough guy. He wanted to be a gangster. And he used them. He used them to get where he needed to get. Never mind, everybody that's glorifying this guy isn't talking about the fact that he was fucking arrested for banging a fucking minor. To me, that's a little sick. They don't mention that. They don't mention that he was going to have to register as a fucking sex offender. Nobody mentions that. Instead, they want to glorify the fucking stupid hairdo, the weird fucking teeth, and the fact that he's a fucking rat. And I don't care who you are, where you come from, where you fucking live. The guy put people in fucking jail because he didn't want to do a day in jail. He was perfectly fine. And I know the argument people make, well, they were banging his girlfriend. They were fucking taking money from him. That's his fucking fault. You want to play with the big boys, that's what's going to happen. And he could have taken it the other way. He could have taken it the other way, and he could have fought his case with the lawyers. He's got the money to defend himself. He could have fought his case, but he didn't. He ratted like a bitch. He ratted like a bitch, and he put people away for no other fucking reason. And then he indicts like a million other fucking people. That's not what a man does. That's what a coward does. And he's not a tough guy. Believe me, if he was a tough guy, he wouldn't have done what he did. But why anybody is celebrating this guy, it just blows my fucking mind. I don't know the kid, wouldn't want to know the kid. But you know what? He's popular. I guess people like his fucking music, and, I guess that's good for him and his credibility as far as making money. But do you guys realize he's never going to be able to go anywhere again? He refused to accept the witness protection program. And so once the fucking feds are done protecting him, he's going to be on his own. What's he going to hire? 6 guys from the neighborhood to protect him? You know what's going to happen then? Mark my word. One of them is going to take enough money to turn on him, give his address, and it's over. That's how he's going to end. He's not going to ride off into the sunset for the next 10 years making hits. The only thing that's going to get hit is him. And I think Meek Mill, who, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I don't listen to his stuff, but I thought that he came out and said something very, very realistic. He said Tekashi 6ix9ine should come out and apologize for being a fucking rat, but most importantly, he should apologize for being a fucking coward. Because you know what he did? He let his wife and his kid, or maybe kids, I don't know how many kids this guy's got, but he basically threw them to the fucking wolves and said, I ain't worried about you, I'm only going to protect myself. That's what a coward does. At least take your girl and your kid, protect them, and your mother, who you keep talking about. They were going to kidnap my mother. Bullshit. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Because I can tell you one thing about the Crips and the Bloods. They're not going to waste their motherfucking time with your mother. They're going to come after you. So what? They banged your girl. Your issue should be with her, not with them. You should have known what time it was. So all of these excuses he likes to give for why he did it. Oh, they beat me up. Oh, they took my money. Oh, they were banging my girl. Oh, they were gonna kidnap my mother. Get the fuck out of here. You wanted to play tough guy. There you go. And what happens the second the fucking red lights and the blue lights go on? Oh, he can't talk fucking fast enough. He can't talk fucking fast enough. But Meek Mill raised a great point. A coward. He didn't even protect his girl or his kid. Who'd at least take your fucking kid. But now he doesn't do that. He's concerned with himself, his image, and his nonsense. And believe me, it's going to end the same way all gangster films from the 30s ended, in a hail of gunfire with him on the fucking corner. Was it worth it? Is it worth your life to be a fucking whatever the fuck it is you think you are? And so that's all I got to say about that. I'm fucking stunned that the hip-hop community, and it's not everybody, but it stuns me the amount of adulation this fucking kid gets. Where the fuck are your morals? It just blows my fucking mind. The world is fucking changing. Hip-hop is going to change forever because of this. You just don't support a guy that does shit like that. You don't buy his fucking records. You don't listen to his... And I get it. People are going to go to his YouTube page and listen because they're curious. I get it. It's a hot-button topic. It's a fucking... something everybody wants to see. But the video is fucking repulsive. He makes fun of himself for being a rat. You know, and the last thing I'm going to say is he made a comment that, fucking... I'd be mad too if I was a fucking rat and I came out here and somebody else was making all this money and I wasn't. Fuck you, you rat. You're a rat piece of shit, fucking nothing. And you deserve whatever you get. I won't feel bad for you. I'm sure your fucking 20 million fans will cry a fucking river over you, dumbass, but I won't. I won't. It's just a matter of time. The time clock has begun. The minute that he fucking sat in front of a judge and spilled his fucking guts about everybody, his life's time clock, his expiration date began. And believe me, I don't think there's any way he could hire fucking John Wayne. It ain't going to save him. All right, so the next item I wanted to talk about, and I'm not even really going to say a whole lot, is this fucking abortion Capone film. First of all, it's horrible. Don't watch it. But if you're interested, go ahead. I don't want... Listen, Tom Hardy's a great actor. I have no idea what fucking planet he was on for this film. I don't even understand the fucking storyline. 2 hours of Capone shitting in his fucking pants like a fucking dog and shooting guns and stabbing people in the neck. They call it a Capone biographical film. Why the fuck am I sitting here seeing Tom Hardy crap his fucking pants and sing Wizard of Oz songs? First of all, none of that fucking happened. Well, Capone might have shit himself. I really don't know. But it was the most distorted, weird fucking movie I've ever seen. Capone, if you're going to do a biographical film, you got to cover Prohibition. You got to cover everything that happened. And we're going to talk a little bit about the St. Valentines Day Massacre today. The guy shit his pants repeatedly in the fucking film. Middle of the road with a diaper and a machine gun. What the fuck did I just watch? And I don't want to go into the other parts of the film, but if you just want to go out and fucking watch the thing, I mean, be my fucking guest. Go out and watch it. But if you really want to know what I thought about it, this will fucking describe it for you right here. It was 2 hours of farting. 2 hours of shitting your pants, firing a gun, and farting. The fuck? We're going to take a break, and when we come back on Mob Talk Radio, we are going to get into your questions. I know at times we like to have a lot of fun on this show, but it's time to get serious about one thing. I know that the coronavirus pandemic has hurt a lot of my listeners and their businesses. Restaurants have been ordered to close, gyms have been ordered to close, cigar lounges have been ordered to close, and even bars have been ordered to close. These are small businesses that don't always have the cash reserves to continue making their rent or mortgage payments. They can't even pay their vendors. My good friend Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen is an experienced bankruptcy lawyer that is there to help you right now. Kaysen & Kaysen represents individuals and small businesses in complex bankruptcy proceedings in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Miami. Give Mike a call at 646-397-6226, and if you mention Mob Talk Radio, he's going to give you a free consultation. Once again, it's Mike Kaysen of Kaysen & Kaysen, 646-397-6226. On a given week, I'm out of town a lot. Whether it's Philadelphia, it's New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, wherever the case may be, I'm always looking for a place where I can sit down and have a great dinner. Ambiance is key, price is obviously key, but the most important thing is the food good? And there's a place I want to tell you about today. It's called Saltwater at Margate. If you are going down to the shore, because I know a lot of people in Philadelphia go to the shore, especially Margate, you're missing out on a great restaurant if you haven't been there. The name is Saltwater Margate. It's at 9401 Ventnor Avenue, Margate City, New Jersey. The phone number there is 609-289-8078. You can also visit them online at saltwatermargate.com. This place is unbelievable. Not only is the food absolutely superb, the price is great too. They're renowned for their pizza and their gnocchi. They have all kinds of different things from mussels to roast pork and Italian fare. So do yourself a favor, do me a favor, go and visit Saltwater Margate. You will not be disappointed. It is a place that I think at some point, if not already, there's going to be lines out the door and around the block. So if you're down on the shore, stop in, go to Saltwater Margate. At least check them out online at saltwatermargate.com. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are going to get into your Q&A, and at the end of the Q&A, we are going to come right back with the new segment called The Nuttiest Gangster. You're not going to want to miss that. All right, so per the usual, if you want to submit questions, you got to go over to Facebook, type in Mob Talk Radio. You can message me there, or you will see a post that's usually posted during the week, Q&A and go. And those are the ways that you can participate. Per the usual, and I always say this, almost at vomitous fucking levels. If I don't get to your question, it's because it's been asked a million times before. There's just too much information that goes into the question in order for me to sit down. In fact, I got a question today about Anthony Strollo that's going to take a bit of time to answer. And the thing is, if I get caught up in answering a very long-winded question, then it takes away from people that have sort of a different question. All right, question number one. Ugh. I say I'm laughing because what I do is I just copy all of them and I throw them into my fucking program, and I don't know which way they're going to come up randomly, and sometimes I don't even read through all the questions. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes there's surprises. This one... All right. Have you listened to the Philly Prime podcast with your bestie Dave Schratweiser? Yeah, I actually have. And you know, there's a lot of reasons why. First of all, I listened to it because there was an article that came out that was completely laughable, and I thought he might talk about it, so I just kind of wanted to dig into him to see what you know, he was up to. But yes, I have listened to it, and listen, I got to say, despite you know, I think the best way to say in this is that, yes, I have listened to one or two episodes, and I got to say, despite the homoerotic intro music, and when I hear that music at the beginning, you know, I sort of picture Dave in a leather mask, sort of filth dancing with his guests like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction. So, you know, look, it's okay. I mean, look, he's doing his own thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Just honestly, I'm shocked he hasn't mentioned Joey Merlino 10,000 times already, because that's usually his MO. But yeah, I listened to one or two of them just to sample what garbage he's spewing. And, you know, it is what it is. All right. Are you a fan of Dean Martin, Jerry Vale, Al Martino, or are you a Sinatra guy? I actually like all four of them. You know, listen, at the end of the day, hands down, I'm a Sinatra guy wholeheartedly. But Dean Martin's also, to me, just as good. You know, I sort of feel bad about putting one ahead of the other, but I think Sinatra was just the most gifted singer in every sense. Dean Martin, Dean Martin had a way of just kind of singing relaxed. There seemed to be an easiness in his craft, which nobody's ever been able to duplicate. If Sinatra was the king of pitch and phrase, then Dean Martin was definitely the king of suave and just being cool. I mean, both are absolutely relevant. Jerry Vale was good, but he wasn't nearly as good as Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra. And Al Martino is... You can't even put him with those guys, but he was good too. I mean, I don't even think Al Martino was on the same fucking planet as Sinatra and Dean Martin, but each have their own relevance in that genre. Okay, have you seen the movie Witness Protection or Witness Protection? Have you seen the movie Witness to the Mob? I saw it for the first time the other day and couldn't believe how many people were in it. Everybody from The Sopranos, Goodfellas, and etc. It was actually really good. I haven't seen it. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't seen it, and this is why. And often it's because every time a mob movie comes in, I think there's one called Chicago Overcoat with Frank Vincent. The same guys are in every mob film. Vinnie Pastore, Tony Sirico, Dominic Chianese, Frank Vincent, Tony Darrow. And I'm not knocking any of their abilities at all. I think each individually, has their own skill set, but the genre just gets saturated time and time again with the same fucking guys. Look, we know they play great gangsters. I don't think any of the guys that I mentioned just a few seconds ago were any better than when they were in Goodfellas or The Sopranos. But the problem is when you're in the same film essentially over and over and over again, for me it just gets mundane. But of all those guys, I think Frank Vincent was the most naturally gifted actor of the bunch. Tony Sirico was really the real deal. But Frank Vincent really was the guy that had the most talent of that bunch. And I would have loved to have seen Frank Vincent do something besides playing a gangster. Unfortunately, he passed away, so we're never going to know. But that's sort of, how it goes. All right. If you'd been a soldier under Gaspipe Casso, we know you have never turned rat, but given how crazy he was at the end of the day and how things were escalating him from a body count standpoint, would you have been a good soldier and and followed his orders, or would you have revolted? What would you have done if he turned on you? Well, I think if Gaspipe Casso turned on you, you're really left with two choices. You either kill or be killed. I mean, or you run for your life. You really didn't have a lot of options with Gaspipe. If the guy had a fucking dream you were a rat and he'd kill you. So I think the most logical thing is you either kill him before he kills you, and you better kill him, because if you don't, you're going to regret it. Jimmy Heidel learned the hard way what happens. But fuck it, jump on a plane and go to Spain for like a fucking year. Stay away from the guy. But Gaspipe didn't leave anybody a whole lot of options. I mean, specifically because of his brutality. All right. With Nicky Scarfo being such a squirrely fucking nut job, how was he even allowed to rise up to being boss? Wouldn't the commission have stopped that in this case, especially after having one or two low key bosses killed within a year? I think that they would have realized putting someone in that unstable as boss would have been bad news. Well, I mean, the reality is Vinny DiCin Gigante wanted to push him in as boss before Phil Testa took over, but Nicky declined, pretty much saying that the job should be rightfully given to Phil Testa. But knowing Nicky Scarfo, he probably knew that the streets were very unstable. I think he probably heard whispers of what was going on, and I don't think he wanted any part of that shit. And after Testa gets killed, Vinny the Chin essentially installs him in as boss. And so I don't think that Nicky, at least from the psychosis standpoint, appeared prior to his rise to be that unstable. I mean, granted, he did a couple of fucking things that were a little loose. Nuts. Yeah, he was absolutely nuts. But I don't think Vinny the Chin realized how off his fucking rocker he truly was. And I don't think that Vinny the Chin could have predicted that Nicky Scarfo was going to be fucking running around town with a penknife killing everybody. And I think that's likely the reason why after Scarfo, the Chin didn't get involved in things in Philadelphia at that point. By a lot of different assertions, Gotti backed Stampa, which kind of makes sense. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't want to say that that's totally accurate, but that's sort of what I've heard, and that would explain some of the resentment. Because really, John Stanfa had no business just showing up and trying to take over. That's the reality. Some people aren't going to like that I said that, but that's just the truth. But I think after Scarfo and his nonsense, I think Vinny the Chin just wiped his hands of it and said, fuck this. All right. Do you think the Chin's alleged successor was picked by the Chin himself or the commission? So from allegations and small bits that I sort of pick up, I mean, Vinny the Chin was very smart, very strong, very powerful. But the thing is, I don't think that he picked a successor. I mean, listen, after the Chin was gone and he was in jail, he controlled the family from jail. I don't really think he handpicked anybody. I think by the time he ended up in prison and started getting sick, he probably just didn't give a fuck. I don't think a lot of people, and I could be wrong. But I think a lot of bosses, probably once they reach the stage where they know they don't have long left, I don't think their thought process is, who's going to succeed me? I need somebody to fucking succeed me. I just don't think that Vinny the Chin thought like that. I think he just said, you know what, we're going to leave this in capable hands. Whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to be here. I don't give a fuck. The one thing he didn't do, which other crime families have sometimes done, is hand it down to somebody who's related. The Genovese crime family went a different direction. Thank God for that. But I don't think at the end of the day he gave it a second thought. All right. If Vito Genovese never comes back into the country because of his murder indictment, how much does this change the following years? Does Castellano have a much longer reign because of his political Costello, not Castellano. Does Costello have a much longer reign because of his political connections? And none to challenge him? Does Carlo Gambino have the balls to whack Anastasia, or does he quietly sit back and just enjoy being the strongest underboss of all time? Does Bonanno still pull his shit and try to whack out the commission? Or does he not make a move to potentially be boss in the 70s or longer? Does Joe Valachi or the Appalachian meeting happen? And do we go into the 70s and 80s without the mafia being exposed? Now, this is a large question. It's a very intricate question. It's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to sit through and nitpick 50 different events. However, I think I can answer this in a way that makes the most sense. I don't think, well, first of all, if Vito Genovese never gets indicted for that murder, then he sits as the underboss, and I think he probably likely would have waited out Luciano, because ultimately Luciano would have gone away either way. He would have been exiled from the country, because I don't think that would have changed. So Vito Genovese would have just ascended the throne technically on his own. He wouldn't have needed power from Gambino, and I also think that springboards the idea that Gambino, he may have moved on Anastasia regardless, but I think I think ultimately, I think Genovese would have taken over on his own. Does that mean that Costello would have relinquished his role? No, I don't think so, because really what it was Costello just pushed Genovese completely out. He fucking kicked him down in his fucking rank, dressed him down, made him a fucking captain. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But does Costello have a longer reign? Yeah, I think he does. I think that, well, I mean, okay, so let's take it on the crux of the actual question. If he never comes back into this country, I think that Costello ultimately runs that family for another 20 fucking years. I think that as a result, Gambino probably doesn't kill Anastasia. I also think as a result that Joe Bonanno, I think, would have been less apt to go at the commission, considering he didn't like Carlo Gambino. And really, if you think about it, if Joe Bonanno hadn't pulled the commission shit and just stayed quiet, stayed relatively himself, I honestly do believe, and I know I give Joe Bonanno a lot of shit, but I honestly believe Joe Bonanno, after Carlo Gambino dies, I think he would have risen to the top. Maybe not boss of bosses or whatever the fuck, but he would have risen to the fucking top, because he would have been the oldest one still left, and he would have commanded a lot of respect, and he would have had a lot of power. But we're never going to know, because he fucked that all up. And I think, if Genovese stays his ass in Italy and doesn't come back, obviously Appalachian never happens, at least not the way it did. Does Joe Valachi still rat? Yeah, I think that would have probably happened either way. But really, when you think about it, that's what's great about this question. is that it basically lays Vito Genovese in front of the train for a lot of things that happened to the mafia. I think ultimately the mafia gets exposed. I don't think that was ever going to change. I mean, you got the Kennedy's bullshit, which had nothing to do with Vito Genovese. But I think that if Genovese doesn't come back, I think relatively a lot of things get run in a more smooth fashion, but we're never going to know. I mean, obviously Vito Genovese and even Carmine Galante started so much shit. But it's a very interesting question because I think that the genesis of the mob and the way that the mob looks would have been very, very, very different. And I think through Costello, Luciano would have kept a firm grip on a lot of different things. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. All right. What would make anyone want to become a fucking prosecutor? Everybody I've ever met that's a prosecutor is an asshole liar. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's like... I think the way to sort of describe this is, you know, when you're a kid, you watch, you know, you played cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers. I always wanted to be the robber. I always wanted to be the Indian. I always wanted to scalp the motherfuckers. I was never like a goody two-shoes, cheer for the good guy kind of deal. I think as you get older, you watch films, you cheer for the good guy a little bit, but there's always a part of you that cheers for the bad guy. You want to see the bad guy get over. You know, nobody watches a heist film hoping. I mean, maybe people who want to be prosecutors sit in their fucking park lounge jerking each other off, and with a bowl of fucking popcorn, buttering their own popcorn. Maybe they're sitting there going, "Oh, gee willikers! I hope the fucking cops get these guys." That was my half Ron Previty voice. I don't know where that came from. Joey Merlin. Yeah, there you go. Ron Previty. Maybe Ron Previty sat on a fucking park lounger watching fucking cops and robbers movies, cheering for the cops. I don't know. Prosecutors got a job like anybody else. I don't think that I've ever met a prosecutor in my life that was a nice guy. They're always jerk-offs. And a lot of that's just because of the politics with it. And I don't think anybody becomes a prosecutor at the end of the day because they make the most money. I think that the genesis of that is... well, you know, I want to put bad guys away. Get the bad guys. Yeah, you see? That sort of shit. But, you know, it is what it is. Some people want to be doctors. Some people want to be lawyers. Some people want to be gangsters. I mean, it just depends. All right. I notice online that you're either loved or hated. Is that a difficult balance for you? It's always the same 12 or 13 people who make wild, unsubstantiated claims. When Trump said people who are sick should drink Lysol and inject it, these are the types that... Okay. All right, let me rephrase this. All right, I notice online you're either loved or hated. Is that a difficult balance for you? It's always the same 12 jerk-offs who make these wild, unsubstantiated, laughable claims. When Donald Trump said publicly that people who are sick should drink Lysol or inject it, these are the exact types of people that should, like, immediately. And I'm assuming that this person is referring to the people that don't like me. I don't think any of them would have the courage to approach you on any level. Keep up the good work. Is it a difficult balance for me? No, not really. I mean, listen, everybody, like an opinion, everybody's, got one, like an asshole. And they're all going to say whatever they want to say. And it doesn't really affect me. I don't spend my day worried about what some obscure fucking inbred piece of shit has to say. I really don't. I mean, I think if people think that I sit at home all day in New York worrying about what people I'm never going to meet, people I'm never going to come across are going to say, I don't care. How much energy do you have to spend in your day talking about other people? I think that says more about you than it does me. So no, it doesn't affect me. I don't get mad. I don't even care. I don't even pay attention to it. Okay. Do you think in terms of history, it's harder or easier these days to become involved in organized crime? It seems like values, at least from the historical sense, are gone. Is this a generational gap, or is this just a matter of the Italian Americans from Italy that are no longer around? It seems, so this is the best way that I can explain this, and I've talked about this before. You take guys like Carlo Gambino, guys that came over from Italy, came to this country with nothing. It was a dog-eat-dog world. Maybe Carlo Gambino is not the best example of this, but when Italians did come to this country, they had nothing. And a part of the problem was the Irish had already come here. And this is going to be a long-winded thing I'm trying to avoid, but when the Italians came over here, they were really treated like shit. That's the truth. The Irish were already here. The Irish didn't like them. In fact, the Guinea comment really comes from the fact it's a nasty thing to say to somebody, and it refers to coins and money, that the Italians were willing to they're willing to work for less for a guinea just to be happy. And a part of that was when the Italians came over here, they were just willing to work. They were willing to work, but they wanted to be compensated the same as everybody else. And the Irish didn't like that. They felt they should know their place, they should know their role, and that's sort of where that shit got started. But when Italians came to this country, they stuck to their own people, same as the Irish, same as the French, whatever the fuck they are, did. And I think when they came over to this country and they tried to earn, and they were paid, and I'm not, this is not a racist thing, I'm just as a reference point, like Mexican people, like you see the thing at Home Depot, they line up allegedly to get work, and they're willing to accept whatever because they just want to work. And that was the Italians. When they came in this country, they wanted to work hard, they wanted to be a part of America, but they were treated like shit. And they end up coming here with nothing. They have to do what they have to do to make ends meet. They have to feed their children. And sometimes that ends up putting them in a situation where they have to break the law. They're not the only group that did this. Everybody was doing it. So it wasn't just the Italians that did it. And so when we're talking about historical, guys came over to this country with nothing, did what they had to do to survive. You're going to have a very hard time arguing with me how a 35-year-old guy today that's raised out in fucking Massapequa in a nice fucking house, got a lot of money, his parents are wealthy, who needs to go into organized crime. I mean, maybe it's a mental defect. I don't fucking know. Maybe he likes the streets. I don't fucking know. Maybe his parents didn't hug and kiss him enough. I don't know. But I think the idea of struggling to make ends meet and take care of your family, there's a big difference between that and having everything you've ever really wanted and still going into that life. So have the values changed? I think that they have. And I don't think that that's because there's non-Sicilians or Northern Italians here. I think that with, we talk about evolution, and I think evolution has changed. There's more ways to make money legitimately these days. There's also other ways to manipulate the system and make more money. So, I don't have the values changed. I think society has changed. And you also got to keep in mind that, and I'm not saying this about the person who asked the question. I think it's more symptomatic of people watching too many fucking movies too. I think a lot of people get the idea of the mafia, the good going Catholics on Sunday, making the sign of the cross when somebody dies. Oh, God rest his soul. Not everybody's like that. That is a design of Hollywood. And I don't think that a lot of people know the difference. I don't think people know the difference. That's why I always bring up the Goodfellas. And I bring that film up not because it was the most factually accurate representation of the mafia. It was the most violent representation and accurate of all mob films. Just the bloodshed, the murder. That's how murders are not like fancy where guys are getting together talking about it. It's done. It's brutal. It's violent. And I don't think people really understand that. I think that they all think that, Joey Merlino or fucking, who else? Carlo Gambino or John Gotti. These guys are sitting around with opera playing and everybody's kissing their hands. I don't think people understand that's not how it is. That's not how it is. It's never really been that way, not even in the 40s and 50s. So I think that there's a distortion that people that don't know mobsters, haven't been around that way of life, don't understand how things operate. I think that they have a fantasy of what this is. A lot of mob life, they you look at it, they show in films, and I'm getting down a rabbit trail, so I apologize, but look at films. They always show the cars, the women, the fucking drugs, but they don't show the guy like fucking working his ass off till his fingers bleed. There are guys that are involved in this lifestyle that work hard. Yeah, sure, I mean, you can argue going down and cracking a guy over the fucking head for the money he owes isn't hard work, but it is. It is hard work, and a lot of these guys own legitimate fucking businesses. So you can think that they're sitting around the social club all day playing fucking cards, calling each other mezzofanooks, and jadruls or whatever the fuck. But a lot of these guys have legitimate businesses, and they have to operate those. And we can argue, where the money comes from and all that kind of good stuff. But I think part of this is generational. I think some of it is values, but I also think it's evolution. Everything changes. Everything changes. Do I think that there are guys that are still hardcore Cosa Nostra through and through till the day they fucking die? 100%. And the mafia's code is not being all about family and not being all about respect and honor. That's just a fucking human being trait. I know guys who aren't involved in the streets that are like that. They go to church on Sunday. God bless you, your family. How you doing? How's your family? That's how they are in general. That's a human trait, not a mob trait. I think it's an Italian trait, I'll be honest with you. Just being affectionate and stuff like that. But family is everything to Italians, and family is everything to good people. It's not just an Italian thing. It's a stereotype. It's a stereotype that just so happens to kind of be close to reality. All right. If given the chance to sit down with Dave Schratweiser and Anastasia and have a three-way conversation about all the particulars, would you do it? How long would the conversation last before you slap that cross-eyed Anastasia's eyes the right direction for once? No, I don't think I would. First of all, they're not going to talk to me. That's number one. Number two, I might be able to handle having a conversation with Anastasia. But Ratweiser, forget it. That guy's a prick. He's just a jerk off. I don't like his arrogance. But no, they're not going to talk to me. I'm not going to talk to them. And two, I think most importantly, they're not going to admit to what they did. They see things their way, just like I see things my way. And I don't think that that's a safe conversation for any of us to have, because they may be used to guys giving them respect. I wouldn't. That's the difference, because I wouldn't just be sitting there having a discussion about the bullshit with me. I would have a discussion on behalf of 10 other motherfuckers who I do like and who I do care about and who have been fucking railroaded by these two pricks, and I would defend them. So I can't imagine that they would want to deal with me on any level when it comes to that. I really don't, at least not with without the cop sitting there. All right. Some people are making claims that you're pro Gotti, now against Gotti. Here we go. Well, I know in any perfect world that you can... See, I don't want to answer this because I'm so tired of this fucking topic, but fuck it, I'll answer it. All right, so the question is, some people say you're pro Gotti, now against Gotti. Well, I know in any perfect world, people cannot tolerate people changing their minds about a topic. God knows they went after Howard Stern for that. I believe it's not so much pro versus anti, but it's more that you've matured in your skill set and have moved on from the drama. So my question is, how often do listeners blur the lines for you? Meaning, take what you say out of context, and does it have any blowback for you? I personally think that it's your show. You can have any opinion you fucking want. You're not in the mob. I just think people can't tell the difference sometimes and manipulate what you say. It's like anything else, right? It's like the fucking whisper game. I can whisper something into somebody's ear in one side of the room. By the time it gets to the other, it's going to be totally different. Yeah, people manipulate what I say. They don't listen to what I say. They hear me say X, Y, Z, and then they turn it off. And then they don't listen for the explanation after the fact. I don't think I'm pro or anti-Gotti. I'm just past talking about it. That doesn't mean I'm enemies and I hate everyone. It just, some things get played out over fucking time. If I sat here all week talking about the same, and I'm sure it gets old hearing about Anastasia and Ratweiser too. And I'm sure people get sick of me talking about Joey Merlino. He probably gets sick of it. I mean, who knows? But the reality here is that people, take exception to what I say all the time, and then they gossip, and they don't even get it right. And that's why I always, when I preface what I say on my show, when I say, now listen close, that means perk your fucking ears up and pay attention, because I don't want people to sort of, manipulate what I say. And I'm allowed to change my fucking viewpoints on people. If it's acceptable for Donald Trump to change his viewpoints, why can't I? Because I guess, I'm held to a different standard than some people. Listen, I got a lot of opinions, and then they change over time. Listen, and I'll tell you something. I'll be very honest with you. I'm not going to mention anybody's name, but I've said this before. There was somebody that when I first met them wasn't too happy with me. They didn't like some of the things I had to say. you know, and regardless of what was said, I had a certain opinion based on maybe not facts, but a lot of gossip and a lot of rumor and what people were saying. And this person's whole beef, because believe me, they could have beefed with me seriously on some of the shit that I said. But he didn't do that. And he just simply, you know, listen, get to know me from me. And if you still want to have that opinion, that's fucking fine. But don't say that when you don't know me. And so, you know, did my opinion change of the person? Fuck yeah. You know, and not because anybody threatened me, because that never happened. People claim this bullshit all the time. Not because that happened. It was because I think that this person was blunt and honest with me and then gave me room to be blunt and honest back. And then you reach a middle ground and then a friendship is formed, a close friendship. And that guy's a good dude. You know, I would do anything for him, and he knows it. And so I think, you know, you should be entitled to change your opinion on people. Not everybody likes to eat pasta the whole fucking life, you know, but people think that because I may have been one way 3 years ago, I'm a little different now. Well, opinions change. My thought process changes. And as you grow and do a show, some of the ways you look at things change. Doesn't make me a liar, doesn't make me nothing but somebody who has differences of fucking opinions. All right. I wanted to give you a compliment because rarely do the haters acknowledge this about you. But you admit when you make a mistake. Factually speaking, you always correct it. Always. You don't even hesitate. It seems like you're the first to admit something. And you're the only one in this genre who does that. I think it takes a lot of balls to do what you do. And so many are jealous because they lack the courage of their own convictions to do what they want. So my question is sort of a very personal one. Who you are, I understand some of what you do is entertainment. So how much of the real Jeff is on this show? People will continue to try to invalidate you all the time. He's not this, he's not that. He doesn't know anything about the mafia, but something tells me that you would definitely smack the shit out of someone if they got respectful with you in person. Thanks. You know, I think the biggest difference, who you're listening to is me. That is me. In real life, am I as amplified as I am now? No, of course not. I'm literally, people get shocked when they meet me. I'm really, at the end of the fucking day, very relatively quiet. I'm not as gregarious in real life. Now, if you get in my face and say something stupid, that's going to be a whole nother fucking situation. I'm the first one to swing in a situation like that. If I'm with people and somebody disrespects my friend, I'm the first one that's going to fucking punch somebody. That's reality. That's just me. That's my genetic makeup. That's who I've always been. That's who I'm always going to be. But in reality, in life, I'm a little more quiet than I am on the show. I don't run through the streets going, fuck you, you jerk off. I don't do any of that. I respect people, but don't get it twisted. I'm a bit of a rattlesnake, and that's the truth. But you know, I think, you know, I think that people have a hard time disassociating the voice from the actual person itself. I mean, we're the same people, but I just think people take this to extremes. And people that talk all this shit don't know me anyway, because if they did, you know, listen, the majority of people that have heard my show, that came across me and met me, are like, wow, you're a really nice guy. You're a really quiet guy. You know, you're not the person I thought you were. Well, no, because I'm entertaining you. That's what I'm supposed to fucking do. If I sat here being a fucking boring jerk off, nobody'd listen to me. So, you know, listen, if I saw somebody in the street who was a rat, would I call him a rat? Fuck yeah. I wouldn't even hesitate. If I'm in a bar sitting with 3 of my friends and somebody disrespects one of them, they don't have to lift a finger. They don't have to look at somebody and give them a nod to handle it. I will be on their ass like you have no idea. On their ass like you have no fucking idea. I won't tolerate it. I don't care if they're mob guys or not. Even mob guys that I know, they don't have to fucking even utter a word or lift a finger if I'm around. Because you will fucking respect them. You will fucking respect them. Not because of who they are, but because they're my friends. And I'll tell you a little story. I got to be a little careful how I tell this, but I was at a place in Philadelphia, and there was some sort of beef with people that were in this place. And these weren't connected people at all, just jerk offs drinking. And so I'm minding my business. I don't want to get involved in nothing. And this guy comes in, and there's a black guy in there, and he uses the N-word or whatever. And it was just sort of a situation that was a guy had too much fucking to drink, and started to just create a situation that really wasn't good. And so I took it upon myself to get involved. And I grabbed a fucking guy that was talking shit to the black guy. I grabbed him by his arm, put him up against the wall, and I just simply fucking said to him, "Do you know where you are?" "Yeah, I know where I am." And he mentions the fucking name. I says, No. "Do you understand where the fuck you are?" "Well, yeah. I says, "Do yourself a favor. You're making a fucking embarrassment out of yourself. You're starting a fucking beef with somebody you don't know over bullshit. You've had too much to drink. Get the fuck out." And I walked him outside, and that was it. I don't do that because I'm a tough guy. I did that because I respect the place I was. I respect the friends that I have in there. And if I can get involved so nobody else has to quiet the shit down, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I would do that for anybody. It's nonsense. People are going to throw their lives away because they've been drinking, and then they start mouthing off and using names. Like, what the fuck? Like, who does it? Why would you go somewhere and start flipping? "Oh, I know this one. I know this one." Shut the fuck up. Get the fuck outside, because I'm going to, get you out the door so at least you have a fucking chance. Because if you keep spouting off, you're not going to have a fucking chance. And so the point I'm trying to make, and it's not a bullshit story. 25 people can back that up. The whole point to the story is that when it comes to me, people can think whatever they want. They can think I'm a big mouth on the radio, that I won't say nothing to nobody. But apparently you don't know me, because I will. And anybody that's known me for any length of time that truly knows me, not the fakes that say they know me that don't, will tell you, you do not want to, and you do not under any circumstances want to disrespect him or anybody with him, because I will fucking react. And that's it. Yeah, sure. Sometimes you got to walk away and just ignore people, but there are other times you just can't. And so it's not a tough guy act. It's not, I'm a tough guy. It's none of that. It's, I hold myself to a standard with my friends. I'll give you a little bit of an example. There may be somebody that I have seen a couple times. "Hello, how you doing?" Maybe have a small conversation or whatever. But if they're related to somebody I know, they get that same respect immediately. Let somebody mouth off at that one or this one. They don't have to do anything. I will do it, because I don't tolerate the fucking nonsense. That's what being a friend is. That's what being what a gentleman is. If you don't know what a gentleman is, then and I don't mean it in the sense of acting right, doing the right thing. There's a street term for gentleman. And that's what I am, All right. Has anyone ever approached you at dinner or eating somewhere or on the streets and said hello because they knew you or they considered yourself a fan? Yeah, actually, believe it or not, that's a strange question, but it happened here in Manhattan. A buddy of mine, Scott, who was over from London or whatever, we was walking down the street going somewhere. Scott would be able to confirm this story, but we were going somewhere and a couple of people stopped and said they were big fans and whatever, which was kind of cool. But a lot of the time when people do come up to me and ask me, I tell them I'm not, and I don't do that because I'm ashamed of what I do. I don't sit there and say no, I'm not that guy because I'm afraid of anybody. It's just because I don't want to stand there for 40 minutes answering fucking mob questions in the middle of the street. It's not that I don't respect my fans. I totally do. But the reality is I just don't have time to sit there and answer their questions right then and there because I'm usually trying to get somewhere. This happened in South Philadelphia a couple of times. I think me and two other people one time were sitting over at, I think Gino's or Pat's. I can't remember which place it was, but I was eating. This guy walks right up and goes, "Oh, you're Jeff Canarsie from Mob Talk Radio." I was like, "No, I'm not." He goes, "Yes, you are. Stop busting my balls." And he was, and he sat and he talked for a while, and that was kind of cool. And then I think there was another time we were walking down the street in South Philly, and this guy came up to us out of nowhere and was like, "Hey, I listened to you on the radio show." So, is that cool? Is that fun? Sure it is. Is it dangerous? Nah, not really. But I think people were generally surprised, especially South Philly people. They were surprised I was there because I think a lot of people think I don't really go there, that I really don't hang out there, that they think I don't know anybody there, and it doesn't matter who you know, who you don't know. But I'm down there all the time. I just, for anybody to sit there and claim that I've never been there is a little bit stupid. But I mean, it's cool to have people walk up to you and say that they like what you do. But I've never had a bad instance. If that's also what you're you're asking. All right. Let's see. When in the movie Donnie Brasco? Okay, what in the movie of Donnie Brasco never happened, like in the Goodfellas scene where Billy Batts was whacked? Can you name other mob movies where some scenes never happened? About everything in The Departed wasn't even fucking accurate. In The Irishman, Russell Buffalino did not die in prison in a wheelchair. He died at home. So there's a bunch of them. But maybe sometime soon we'll do a whole thing about the inaccuracies of film and the mob. Okay. You've mentioned some people in the life have objected to things said on the show, but that these issues were discussed and resolved like gentlemen. But what if they approached you differently, like yelled at you or hit you? Would you respond in kind or just take it because of their status? That's an interesting question, believe it or not. Look, I think there's a code with certain guys. I think that if there's an issue or a beef, it's usually 100% of the time, 99.9% of the time, handled like men. You talk, you agree to disagree, you just move on. Nothing I do has ever put anybody in harm's way. Nothing I have ever done elevates their stature in the mob. I don't think it elevates who they are. I don't think it puts them on the map. Look, what I do is I defend my friends. And I think that because I do that, makes it hard for the whole universal group to hate me. But yeah, there's always going to be some that just don't like me, and that's okay with me. I'm never going to dog nobody. I'm always going to do what I do. So let's say, if somebody yelled at me, I'm not going to yell back. I don't think you solve anything by arguing with anybody. It doesn't matter who the fuck they are, but I just don't think that you solve anything. Because if they're coming at you and they're already upset, you being upset is just going to elevate who they are. It's going to piss them off even more. So I don't think you yell back. But just because you are who you are doesn't mean you get a pass either. If somebody laid their hands on me, who knows what you would do in that situation, but it might be a situation where I don't do nothing. Because what's the fucking point? Who wants to go to jail? You know what I mean? But there are certain things that you do and certain things you don't do. But the reality is if somebody did, the likelihood is I might not do anything then and there, but at some point I would. And that's not a threat to anybody. That's just who I am. If somebody fucking smacked me around and I didn't do anything then, you better believe at some point it will. And to me, it doesn't matter who the fuck you are. While I respect people, while I respect positions and stuff like that, and people do deserve respect. But I think if they're acting out of character or they're acting reckless and they're acting stupid for no reason, it's really my firm belief that regardless of their status, I think they're going to be held accountable by their own people for acting like that. So I don't think it's one thing if I run out and I grabbed a guy's girlfriend's ass or I insulted his girlfriend or his wife. Then I get whatever's coming to me. But if I've done nothing wrong and somebody wants to beef and put their hands on me, that's a little bit different of a story. And I think anybody that is respected in any way universally in that life isn't going to do that anyway. It's been my experience. Guys want to talk it out, and a guy might beef with you. Yeah, go fuck yourself. I don't like you. Okay, that's fine. But I don't know. At the end of the day, I think the situation just depends on what it is. But and I think running your mouth about people who you think are never going to find out, that's a bad thing too. So if there's ever been a time where anybody's had a beef with what I said, I never hide from what I say. It doesn't make me a prick. But it's just, I think every situation just depends. And listen, I don't think anybody is going to run at me and just put their hands on me. But am I going to back down? No, I don't. You can be whoever you want, but I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to not be a man because of you having a position. And I think if you're a man, I think you understand that. And I think those guys in that life understand that. This guy's not going to just take it, you know. But I do know of a fat geezer down in South Philly who got himself a little talking to over his fucking mouth. So I mean, the reality is your mouth does catch up to you, but I'm never going to have those problems. But if I did, you know, you just got to address it as it hits. All right. What was Anthony Strollo's part in setting up Vito Genovese on the heroin bust? Can you give some background and then some info on his disappearance, never to be seen again? Strollo really got his start back in Prohibition as a bootlegger and a hitman for Joe the Boss Masseria. His cousin actually was Lenny Strollo, who was a made guy in Youngstown. As the Castellari War began, like right around, I think, 1931, Strollo would defect, and then he would join Salvatore Maranzano's side of the fence. He was kind of a guy that played both sides. And as the war ended, he would join Lucky Luciano, and he would become a captain under Vito Genovese, and he would go on to control the Greenwich Village crew. Luciano ends up going away in 1936, which would propel Genovese to the top, and it would elevate, and in turn, he would elevate Strollo to underboss. In 1937, Genovese takes off to Italy as that murder charge sort of gets handed down, and in his absence, Genovese has a problem because Frank Costello just kind of did a hostile takeover. Genovese wanted Strollo to take over the family, but Costello refused, and then he busts Strollo down to a captain, and he brings in Willie Moretti and makes him the underboss. It was a move on behalf of Luciano to try to keep control of the family, and Genovese would himself be busted down to captain, which would further exacerbate the problem in the Genovese crime family. So when Vito Genovese gets out, he sort of gets together with Strollo and sort of lets Strollo be his eyes and ears, lets him handle the day-to-day operations of the New Jersey rackets, and some rackets in New York as well. The illegitimate money, that he had, he would open up several night spots on behalf of himself, Vito Genovese, and Christy Ticfunari. And then in 1952, Strollo ends up getting subpoenaed to testify at the New York State Crime Commission hearings. Per the usual, like everybody else in them days, he would incite his Fifth Amendment a million times, would say he didn't remember this, didn't remember that, and that was pretty much it. And also at this time, Genovese pretty much wants to control everything, and he ends up going to Gambino with the idea of hitting Anastasia and Costello, and he employs Anthony Strollo to sort of handle the hit on Costello. And obviously what Strollo does at that point is he begins to clock Costello, begins to sort of memorize his fucking routine, watches him very close, basically counter surveillance techniques, and he ends up giving the information over to Vinny the Cingigante, who we all know how he fucked the dog on that one, and didn't end up killing Costello. And so what happens after that is Strollo begins to sort of get worried that Vito Genovese is sort of a bit of a bug, a fucking tick, and Genovese is never going to buck the pressure. And I think that Strollo maybe saw sort of a gap where he could fit himself in to try and get around Genovese, because I think the reality is he was scared of Genovese, and what he might be capable of doing to him. And Genovese by nature was a turf monger. He just this relentless need to like have as much territory and turf as he could, while being a prick at the same time. And so Strollo sort of begins to feel like his days are numbered. And he also had friendships with Gambino and Luciano despite, which went back to the old days. And so he basically gets approached by feelers from on behalf of Carlo Gambino, and basically goes with the plan that Genovese was probably a problem, and that he got himself involved. He agreed to get involved in the narcotics operation, which would lock Genovese up for the rest of his life. And in return for those efforts, he would be able to return 40% of Genovese's drug rackets, which was big money for him. Because what they really needed at the end of the day was they needed somebody who knew Genovese's schedule. They needed somebody who knew the ins and outs of his daily routine, where this was going, where that was going, because without that information, they couldn't drop a dime. And that's basically what Strollo does. is he ends up going to some cops that were on the take, and he totally tells them that what this drug operation is, where he's picking up narcotics, and that, you know, he will definitely take care of them financially, but in return for them getting the arrest of a century and a couple of kickbacks, he wanted to make sure that the Gambino, what would become the Gambino crime family, things were looked the other way, and he also wanted to ensure that whatever rackets that he had or what would absorb as a result of Genovese going away, he could sort of keep and just be left alone. And so what Strollo does is he dimes fucking Genovese out on behalf of Gambino and Costello. And so the rest is sort of fucking history. But the problem is that Genovese, while he's in prison for the narcotics shit, realizes very quickly that Strollo, the only way that the cops could have found out about this is Strollo telling them. And so what Genovese does is he has Strollo fucking whacked. And he disappears in 1962. And word is, from what I've heard from various circles, is that he was actually strangled and shot multiple times and then buried on a horse farm in New Jersey. So, you know, Strollo thought he could get the hands up, and he didn't. And that's just the reality. Not a question, just an observation. Half of Murder Inc. was electrocuted in the 1930s. Yes, in those days, gangsters got electrocuted. All right, I saw in the documentary where Alex Rudai was whooped Joe Gallo's ass and took over the Gotti's table at Rouse. That is accurate. All right, have you seen the National Crime Syndicate video on Albert Anastasia? Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff on Albert Anastasia. I don't know if I've seen that specific one, but I have seen some. All right, where did the mob guys have it good at? State prisons or federal prisons? And when did that stop for them? What year? Look, I can't tell you what year. I'm not in federal prison, honestly, but I think early days, 50s, 60s, and prior to that, I think it was just easier to sneak stuff into prisons. And I think Goodfellas showed really how that operated. And I really don't think that was bullshit. I think that those things really took place. I've talked to a lot of guys that have been to prison that could get anything smuggled in that they needed. Listen, the hacks are all on the fucking take anyway. Just looking at Rikers Island, just the amount of drugs that are being smuggled in on Rikers Island. So I think, you know, of the two, if you got to go to prison, go federal. Don't go to fucking state prison. You know, crimes versus the state are a little different than crimes against the federal government. Still danger level, but a little bit different. You know, I don't really even think smuggling the food in is totally stopped. Is it going to be like Goodfellas? No, not today. But I would think probably in the mid 60s to late 60s before 1970, that probably changed. All right. Did Jimmy Burke get permission from Paul Vario to whack all those guys after the Lufthansa heist? And how was prison life for those guys, considering they got basically a death sentence? You know, I think the reality is I don't think he needed permission from Paul Vario unless they were made guys. If they were made guys, he needed Paulie's permission to do it. And the order to kill anybody that was made would have come from Vario. But as far as like killing guys that were fringe guys, he didn't need a fucking permission, not whatsoever. You know, and I think that I think the reason why Paul Vario would have signed off on guys getting whacked that were made was to keep everybody quiet from the heist. I mean, Paul Vario doesn't want to take a charge of orchestrating the Lufthansa heist, even though he didn't orchestrate it, but he did take profits from it. So I think anything to control the narrative if somebody went bad, he was going to do. As far as what prison life was like for Jimmy Burke was a shot caller in prison. I don't think he had any fucking problems. Jimmy Coonan's a shot caller in prison. I don't think he's got no problems. Guys that were active on the street, that were shot callers on the street, are shot callers in prison. That's just how it works. All right. Was Frank Sheeran involved in Jimmy Hoffa and Joey Gallo murders? Okay, I've covered this a whole lot. So let me just say this. Go back and look at Frank Sheeran shows I've done, Jimmy Hoffa shows I've done, Joey Gallo shows I've done. And here's my opinion. After we've talked about this for God knows, a fucking 2 years. Look, I believe if Frank Sheeran was not involved, he knew who was, and he knew the intimate details. If somebody held a gun to my head, I would say that he probably was in, on, or at the Hoffa murder scene, but I don't think... If somebody held a gun to my head and said, do you believe he killed Joey Gallo or do you believe he was involved in Hoffa? I would put my money more on Hoffa than Joey Gallo. All right. Who had the best social club in your opinion? Location, amenities, ambiance. Vinny Gorgeous, hands down. I know a lot of people probably think I'm going to say the Ravenite. No. or the Wimpy Boys Social Club. No, Vinnie Gorgeous, hands down. All right. Who do you think had the most power at the time? The outfit when they controlled the casinos in Vegas, or the East Coast families when their various East Coast operations, say 60s to the 70s, early 80s? Tough question, but the outfit in the early days, they really controlled politics, and we talk about that all the time. When you control politics, you control everything. So in many ways, the East Coast families also controlled politics as well, but it wasn't the same. But hands down, the mere fact, and I've said this before, Carlo Gambino could shut down the entire fucking Eastern Seaboard with one phone call, and that is absolute fucking power. Don't forget, the New York families also took a cut out of Vegas as well. Midwest guys didn't get a kick out of fucking Atlantic City, but the New York guys got kicks out of Vegas. And I also think just construction alone, and I think the fact that the New York mob controlled unions probably made them stronger. All right, can you talk about... No, I'm not going to go there. Let's see. Jeff, from what I could find out, Johnny Keys Simone was in on the hit of Angelo Bruno. What was his part and what was he getting out of it? That's what the rumors allege. Okay. That's really what the rumors allege, but I don't know if I really buy that. I think, realistically, I think John Stanfa did it. I say that with a little trepidation, but think about the logistics of that. I mean, Bruno was hit the way he was, and Stanfa isn't shot, doesn't take any, buckshot to his fucking ass or face. You're going to blow a guy's fucking head off sitting in a driver's seat, and Stanfa doesn't get touched. And that sort of tells me two things. It tells me that Stanfa was completely in on it, knew it was going to happen, because a shooter under any of those circumstances who's going to whack a boss is not going to leave a witness. There's just no way you're going to do that. And if you look at historically about how Philadelphia handles its fucking problems, they don't leave anybody to chance. So if Simone did do it, the only part he would really get out of that is, look, guys are going to say, oh, you do this, you'll move up in rank, you'll get money, you get stature in the streets. And that's the only reason why you would even get involved in that, because anybody that was involved with whacking Angelo Bruno is going to get killed. That's why I don't think that he was in on it. I don't think he's the guy that pulled the trigger. And you're going to be really hard-pressed for me to ever believe that Stanfa was just a lucky passenger who got away without being unscathed. You're just not going to be able to talk me into that. All right, have you ever seen the Gangster Chronicles? No, I don't think I have, but I will check it out. Was the former jewel thief, current YouTuber, Larry Lawton, really a mafia associate, or was he just boasting bullshit? In my opinion, I don't know the guy. But if you're calling yourself, there's a big difference between calling yourself an associate and being an associate. Those are two different things. Did he rub elbows? Absolutely. But I have a hard time buying that his bookmaking stories, only because I don't know a lot about the guy. But I highly doubt that guys weren't taking a cut of his action. A lot of these guys like to say, "Oh, I was bookmaking $100,000 a month, this shit, that shit." And they're not Italians working in a crew. You think they're not getting shaken down for a fucking percentage? They are. So I just don't know if look. The guy was a fucking jewel heist guy. He was good at robbing places and stealing shit. Why would he need to bookmake? So yeah, do I know for a fact? No, but I'll be honest with you. I never heard of the guy's name before this person mentioned the question. That should tell you something. All right. I assume most wise guys are personally conservative. But does La Cosa Nostra benefit more from Democratic or Republican politics? Of course, they adjust either way, but has one been more beneficial overall? Look, the one thing I don't discuss is politics. Some fucking nut jobs are claiming I'm pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I just don't discuss politics. Which way I lean doesn't fucking matter. I'm not a politician. I'm a radio show host. Assholes in, assholes out. That's the way it always works. I couldn't tell you what all mob guys think, but I could probably tell you that most of them are pro-Donald Trump. I'd be willing to put money on that. And I think the mob benefits and always has benefited more from Republicans more than Democrats. Remember, look, the mob tried backing a Democrat. Look how that fucking worked out for them. We saw how that ended. All right, who is the most woke wise guy or perhaps former wise guy that you know of? by woke, I'm assuming you're meaning intelligent, crafty, and etc. There's a few. There's a handful. Some are down in Philadelphia. Some are in New York. There's a guy I know in Chicago that's seriously woke. Oh, excuse me. Wow. Apologies there, fucking coffee. But for the sake of my own longevity, I think I'll only mention old school guys. Vinny the Chin, Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, Ray Patriarca, Russ Buffalino, Santos Traficante, the old heads. All right. Are you going to do a show about Charlie or John Carneglia? Yes, at some point. All right. Do the guys who bought their button tend to do okay in the mob, or are they done when the money's gone? Well, specifically, the Angiulo brothers from Providence totally bought into the patriarchal crime family. They bought their buttons, and their worth was sheer money driven. Believe me, the guys couldn't earn. I don't think the patriarchs would have ever let them come in. And a matter of fact, I could say that they weren't fully trusted either. Why people would take money to allow somebody they don't know to come in, I don't know. But if you can't provide money, if you can't earn, then what is your worth to them? So I always say, in the old days, if you couldn't earn, and you couldn't kill, you weren't worth shit. You had to do one of two. You either had to kill or you had to earn. These days, it's a little different. It's a lot of it's about money. And in my opinion, if you can do both, you are commodity. If you can kill and earn, then you're like the prized possession. You're like the fucking all-star in AAA baseball. I have mad respect for any boss. And that's the other thing. There's a lot of bosses who won't kill. I don't think Paul Castellano ever killed anybody in his fucking life. But I have mad respect for a boss who, prior to becoming a boss or during a boss or is a boss, who picks up a fucking gun and ends a creep on his own without ordering it. I think and that's the disconnect. Is it was easy for Paul Castellano to order a murder, but it's different if he just does it himself. Guys like Gaspipe Casso, I'm not saying I'm not giving him an accolade because he's a rat, but I'm just saying the guy would pick up a gun and go do it himself. I think there is something about a boss who says, nope, fuck this, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to do it myself. I got mad respect for guys that do that. It's one thing to order it, it's another to be a fucking man and do it. That's what a real man is in terms of that particular subject. Guys who sit on a mansion on a hill barking orders to everybody, I just, they order orders like they order people around like a fucking dog. I'd rather see a guy who's willing to say, nah, fuck this, I'll take care of it myself, and they do it. You got to lead by example. All right. When will the Flanagans wrap? Listen, I'm not sure because of the pandemic and everything kind of gets set back, and we've got some stuff we got to finish up. We got to make some hard edits, maybe reshoot a couple of scenes, maybe a casting change or two. You never really know because we're unable to move forward at this point because of the pandemic. But once the pandemic ends and we're able to edit, maybe make some casting changes here or there, that's when we'll do it. All right. Hey Jeff, not so much mob related question, but gangs. I live in Australia and I can't get my head around the sheer number of African American gangs in your country. Are they still as bad shootings, gangs on every corner as they were in the 70s and 80s? We have biker gangs here, but in the sense of gangs, we don't have them. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, listen, we still have we got MS-13, the Crips, the Bloods, you got different subsects of the Crips and Bloods. Yeah, it's still bad. And then you've got cliques and other stuff that goes on. But yeah, it's still, it's still bad. Actually, I told this story, and I don't want to get into the complete. You know what I will? Here's what I'll do. I am going to take a break, and I'll come back, and I will tell the Bed-Stuy story. Stay tuned to Mob Talk Radio. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. Before we cut to the break there, I mentioned Bed-Stuy. At one point, I was living in Bed-Stuy, minding my business, standing on the corner of Tompkins and Gates. People from Bed-Stuy know what I'm talking about. And I'm minding my business, not really paying attention to my surroundings. And there's a kid coming up on a bike, probably 100 feet from me, and he's minding his business. But then I see three other guys who were pretty much going around cars heading his direction. I didn't think nothing of it. I turned my head, and next thing I know, the bricks above my head. I moved to the left-hand side about 3 inches. And the bricks, the mortar of the building that I was standing by, the bricks right above where I was standing were exploding, and bullets were pinging off everywhere. And what it was three guys killing another guy. And they shot him a bunch of fucking times, and the kid that got hit landed on the pavement about 20 feet from me. Blood just fucking everywhere. He was a 19-year-old kid. I think his last name was Applewhite. I can't remember what his first name is, but the surveillance video that they put on NYPD, you see me standing there, and then you see me bolting like a motherfucker as soon as the gunfire began. And I actually called Elio immediately, and he came and got me the fuck out of there. Because the cops wanted to roust about me and ask me, and of course, I hadn't seen nothing. So, this is a pretty scary fucking situation. Broad daylight, they pumped this kid full of lead, and it is what it is. So yeah, gangs are active, most definitely. All right. What do gangsters do with their cash? I read that Meyer Lansky put it in overseas accounts, but with the digital age, things have changed. Some invest. Okay. Well, basically, guys invest in business. Anything that they can do to hide the money and make themselves legitimate, they're going to do. But I can only imagine if you're a boss of a family how difficult that can be. But that's pretty much what they do. I mean, they spend money like anybody else does. Nothing really particular there. Do you think the mob is eventually going to die out in the next 20 to 30 years from now, as the old timers die off and considering the new generation isn't capable or interested in the mafia's lifestyle? No, you're never going to take away the mob. It's always going to be there. It's never going to change. It's going to morph into something different. And I think we've seen that in the last 20 years, especially like the pump and dump schemes and fraud, banking fraud and stuff like that. They're just gonna evolve. They're just gonna evolve. All right. Do you know of any info on the made guy in Italy that cut up people to feed his pigs? Also, what's your opinion on the best place to buy leather jackets? It depends, because there's several guys that have done that kind of thing. I don't know which one you're specifically talking about, but I'm just going to assume you're talking about the murder of Francesco Racosta, which was sort of done by, at least according to the Italian government, Simone Pepe. Not only did they beat the guy with pipes, but then they fed him to the pigs. Pepe was actually caught on wiretaps laughing about Racosta screaming, and he marveled at how the pigs didn't leave a trace of the guy whatsoever. And that's also the work of Ndrangheta, which tells you pretty much everything. The murder was done as a result by feuding within Ndrangheta with various clans that have been warring since the 1950s. And I don't know if that's who you're specifically talking about, because there's a couple that did it. As far as buying leather coats, go to Italy. Buy them in Milan or Florence. I know I bought mine in Florence. Good price, good quality, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I'm not touching this one. Do you think Sonny Francis would have been named boss over Joe Colombo had he not been locked up in prison? Do you think he would have gone along with Joe Bonanno and Joe Magliocco's plan to kill the commission? No, I don't think Francis would have gone along with that at all. He was a traditionalist. He was a tough guy. I don't think he would have stood for it. In fact, he might have just killed fucking Bonanno himself. Do I think he would have been boss? Absolutely. Should he have been boss? Absolutely. Just kind of the luck of the draw being in prison. Okay. You talked about listening to Jim Cornette. And if you don't know who Jim Cornette is, he is a former wrestling promoter, a former wrestling manager. And so that's who Jim Cornette is. He does have a podcast, The Cult of Cornette, Cornette's Drive-Thru on YouTube. Check that out. I listen to that all the time. He always cracks me up. Anyway, so the question, you talked about listening to Jim Cornette, and you covered the Dino Bravo murder. So my question is, who were your favorite wrestlers, and why did you stop watching wrestling? Listen, I never really got into WWE or what they used to call WWF. I think that I think I was more into what they traditionally call Southern wrestling, Mid-Atlantic wrestling. It was a little bit different. I think that WWE at the time was sort of more about entertainment, really, even in the 90s and 80s or the 90s. And I'm not trying to like juxtapose which one was better. I think I just identified more with Mid-Atlantic and Southern style of wrestling. It seemed to be more focused on the wrestling aspect versus the soap opera fucking narrative. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. When I was a little kid, we'd rent the pay-per-views and stuff like that. I just never got into the WWE or WWF quite like that. But obviously, I was a big fan of the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, the Road Warriors, Dusty Rhodes. I fucking hated Ric Flair with a passion. But as, you get older, you kind of realize what a national treasure, Ric Flair is in terms of wrestling. But some other guys, Ronnie Garvin, Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, Ricky Steamboat, Wahoo McDaniel, who my father actually knew, were some of my favorites. And those fucking albinos, the fucking Mulkey Boys. I don't know if you're not a wrestling fan, you're not going to get this reference. But if you look up the Mulkey Boys, there were two fucking albinos who just get the shit beat out of them every fucking week. And my father would love watching them get the piss taken out of them on Saturday nights. He lived for that shit. He wanted to see the Mulkeys get killed every week. He loved it. But I think I mainly grew out of it, especially, when the style went, especially when Mid-Atlantic went to NWA and NWA went to WCW. The storylines in the wrestling sort of became more entertainment than actual wrestling. And it just got to be a little ridiculous. I think some of the bookers they had, like when Dusty Rhodes really stopped being a booker, and Ole Anderson kind of took over, it kind of went to shit. But listen, you could say what you want about wrestling in general, but I don't think you're ever going to beat the Four Horsemen narrative ever. I just think that's going to go down as history as one of the greatest sort of time periods in wrestling. But listen, if I was forced to really pick somebody from the WWE or WWF, I mean, obviously Bret Hart, the British Bulldog, and Roddy Piper. My God, I loved Roddy Piper. Who couldn't love Roddy Piper? It's a fucking shame that Roddy Piper is gone. I like Jake the Snake Roberts and stuff like that, but I really haven't watched. I don't think I've seen a wrestling show in 30 years, 25, 30 years. I don't like what it's become. And I can understand Jim Cornette's his perspective on that. But I actually have a wrestling story, believe it or not. When I was a kid, my father would take me to wrestling matches. And it's funny because my mother used to say all the time, I don't know why he's taking you to this shit. It's all nonsense. Who wants to watch this shit? But I think my father was really secretly a bigger fan of wrestling than I was. He would always complain, oh, turn this shit off. Why are we watching this? But I think my father secretly loved that shit. And so he took me to a match, and it was literally the NWA. And I'm probably not, I think it was right around the time period like Nikita Koloff, Magnum TA, Dusty Rhodes were all feuding and stuff like that. And so he took me to a match. And my father took me to a lot of things. Like one of the big things was the Navy boxing matches. My father loved boxing. And one of my greatest memories as a kid is him taking me into a smoke-filled, beer guzzling gymnasium to watch Navy guys beat the piss out of each other. I mean, when you're a kid, you hear some salty fucking language out of sailors, but my father loved that shit. And I love going to the boxing matches with him. And my father, this is kind of a funny thing. I can't believe I'm going to tell this story, but when I was a kid, they had these little candy cigarettes, and you basically, I think what they did was they put like a little baking powder on it. And if you blew hard enough, smoke would come out the front. And my father knew I wanted to fit in with like the raucous fucking Navy crowd. And so my father bought me these fucking candy cigarettes, and I'd put them in my mouth because everybody else is smoking in this gymnasium, screaming obscenities at the boxers, and I would put it in my mouth and puff out a smoke. It just made me feel like a part of the guys. It made me feel like an adult, and it just those are special little memories that I have. And boxing was just the thing. So anyway, we go to this wrestling thing. And it was sort of a last minute thing. You know, they advertised it on TV or whatever the fuck. And I said to my father, can we go? Can we go? Yeah, sure, not a problem. So we go, and I'm excited. You know, we get in there, and you can smell like cotton candy, and you can see the ring. And it surprised me how loud the fucking ring was. I mean, when you hit the ring, it like echoes. And so I was very excited. I didn't know what the fuck. I had never been to one. And so we start watching matches, and there was this wrestler by the name of Sam Houston. And I'm sorry for people that came to my show to listen to the Mafia, but this is a good story, I think, of just my father, of who he was. So we're sitting there, and we're sitting next to this fucking guy who has got like a 10-gallon cowboy hat on. He's chewing dip. He's spitting in the fucking cups. There's all this crazy shit. He looks like out of central casting of what you would think a fucking huge redneck would be. But at the end of the day, so there's this guy named Sam Houston. He bills himself from fucking Houston, Texas, or whatever. Probably closest thing he ever got to a cow was eating a fucking burger at Wendy's. You know what I mean? And so he's fighting. I want to say it was one of the Russians, Nikita Khrushchev, one of these guys. And of course, the time period, you know, it's after the Cold War, obviously, but obviously this guy's a fucking redneck, and he hates Russians. Fuck you, kick his ass, Sam Houston, kick that Russian's ass, fucking commie bastard. I mean, that's just the way the guy talked. And my father's laughing like a fucking child. My father's like in hysterics, and I'm too young to really understand why my father's laughing. And why my father's laughing is because this guy thinks the shit's real. He thinks it's real, and he's cheering, hooting, and hollering, stomping his feet, getting into this fucking shit. And so my father says, hey, switch seats with me, son. So I switch seats with my father, and my father's got his hands on his face. He's laughing so hard, and I, you know, looking back on it, now I know my father was setting this guy up. And the guy notices my father's laughing, and he says to my father, he goes, what's so funny? And my father looks at him, and with probably one of the most honest and sarcastic grins, he says, you know this shit's not real, right? The guy has a look on his face like my father just killed his fucking beagle. He puts his hands in his face in his fucking hands, starts shaking his head. And my father says, yeah, I'm telling you, this shit isn't real. You really think, you dumb fuck, that they could hit each other with a fucking chair over the head and they'd be able to walk? Wouldn't the police arrest them? He goes, I bet you they're all out back drinking beers right now, laughing about how stupid all of us are who pay for these tickets. That guy had the look on his face that someone had killed his hero. And of course, my father starts cracking up. And then my father gets up to go to the restroom or whatever the fuck he was doing. And this guy says, the guy looks at me and says, yeah, you sit next to me. He wouldn't utter another word to my father the rest of the night. In 30 seconds, my father ruined this guy's whole entire life by telling him the blunt truth. And I look back on that and I laugh my fucking ass off, because at the end of the day, I don't think my father was trying to be malicious. I think that my father really didn't think that this guy believed this shit was real, but he did. And so that's sort of how my father ruined one guy's fucking life in 20 seconds. 20 fucking seconds. Last question of the day. Was Frank Cullotta made? No, he absolutely was not made. All right, so I'm going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we got a new segment for you.
And now it's time for an all-new segment called You're the Nuttiest Gangster. You're not crazy, you're fucking nuts!
And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. Now, if you just heard the new intro to what we are doing, it's a little segment that I like to call the Nuttiest fucking Gangster. And the reason why, obviously, Nicky Scarfo would be a fucking contender because of what he did with the horse. We could talk about Mad Sam DiStefano and some of the things he did. And rather than talk about some of the egregious shit like Mad Sam just DiStefano fucking ice picking somebody's balls, I was able to sort of uncover a story that it's a little macabre, but I'm not going to lie to you. I laughed my ass off reading it. It's just fucking nuts. The whole fucking story is nuts. It's a true story, and I just figure, why not? It's a story that involves a real gangster from a real time period. In fact, you can actually look up some of this story for yourself. But let's go ahead and get right into the story. The guy's name is Frank McErlane. The guy was a total fucking shit show. He was a raging Irish gangster and alcoholic from Chicago. He was most noted for his killing expertise during Chicago's beer wars. McErlane was credited with killing 3 men during the war, aligning himself with Al Capone and Johnny Torrio. He would end up going on to whack 3 O'Donnell gangsters in September of that year: Jerry O'Connor, George Butcher, and George Megan. Then in 1924, McErlane is essentially sitting in a bar. Okay, and he's sitting with a guy by the name of John O'Reilly and Alex McCabe, and they're all drinking, having a good old time, when McCabe and O'Reilly begin busting McErlane's balls about his ability as a sharpshooter, his ability to kill people. McErlane used to brag about his shooting capabilities to everybody. Oh, I could, he once bragged that he could shoot a dime from across the room, the head of a dime, which is probably fucking nonsense, but these guys are busting his balls. The fact that their drinking probably didn't help, and so the ball busting gets worse and worse and worse. So McErlane ends up pulling out a gun immediately, and he shoots a guy by the name of Thaddeus Fincher, who was sitting at the end of the crowded bar, with a single shot to the head. McErlane complained right after the fact that there was too much smoke, and had there not been, he would have blown his left eye out of the window, so into the street. So here's a guy who just whips out a fucking pistol in the middle of a smoky bar, just kills a motherfucker just for the point of satisfying the ball busting. And the fact that he was upset with not pushing the guy's eye out his head and out the window seemed to upset him. In fact, O'Reilly and McCabe would end up getting in a lot of trouble for this. I believe McCabe ended up doing a life sentence, and O'Reilly was able to get up. Or excuse me, it's a reverse. O'Reilly would end up getting life in prison, and McCabe would actually whack the witness who saw them do this, and would end up sort of getting out of prison as a result of that. So this is just going to get worse. In 1925, McErlane would whack George Carl and William Dickman, who were rivals of Capone and them, and they were members of the O'Donnell gang. But if you thought our friend Frankie was nuts, just fucking wait, because he made fucking history as far as being a fucking nut just months later. McErlane, who was a fucking gun nut, was able to acquire a Tommy gun from Dean O'Banion. McErlane would be the first guy in history to use a Tommy gun in gang warfare by trying to kill gang leader Spike O'Donnell. He would unleash a barrage of bullets and completely fucking missed everybody, shooting the roof of his car, shooting out the windows of his car, spraying bullets fucking everywhere but the fucking intended target. And not to be outdone, he would eventually learn how to use the gun, and he started killing without hesitation. And he was a real mental case. In 1931, he does something that left him as one of history's most hilarious and nutty fucking gangsters. So McErlane's in an all-night bar, tying a few off. For whatever fucking reason, this is great, he decides to leave the bar. And that's when the ghosts of the past begin to haunt him like Ebenezer Scrooge. For whatever fucking reason, he starts walking down the street and he starts lighting up the fucking block with gunfire. We aren't talking precision here, folks. This fucking whack job was shooting in the air, screaming, laughing, almost like some scene out of the fucking Three Stooges. He opened up with a pistol, starts firing that off. He starts firing shotgun blasts into midair and more. Every 10 feet. Boom, boom, boom. Then he does something very fucking strange. He goes home. He rouses his wife out of bed. He tells her to get dressed. Put the jackets on the dogs. Get them in the car. So now he's in the car. He's got his wife sitting next to him, and he's got the 2 fucking German Shepherds sitting in the back seat of the car. He drives back to South Shore Drive, and he randomly just starts firing out the fucking window. Eventually, his wife is hysterical. She doesn't know what the fuck is going on. So he looks over at her and says, "Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up." And she wouldn't. So he shoots her 4 times in the fucking head. The dogs, who had been warned repeatedly to stop barking because they were going to alert the ghosts of his location, wouldn't shut up. So he turns around, he screams at their fucking rats and they're talking too much, and shoots and kills them. Police end up pulling him over. They approached the car and asked him what the fuck he was doing. Apparently, according to reports, McErlane was chasing ghosts, and they were all over the streets, and he was saving the neighborhood from spooks and ghosts. And he was dead serious. This isn't just like a gangster getting caught for something, making up a bunch of nonsense. This motherfucker was dead serious. Utterly serious. He would be charged with drunk and disorderly conduct, for carrying a concealed weapon, charged with indiscriminately firing off shotgun rounds, driving with a hand-forged license plates. He would be charged with cannibalism because he allegedly, prior to this, bit his sister on the face. And for the murder of his wife. He had been driving around town with his wife's bullet-ridden body in the front seat of the car. He whacks the fucking dogs, claims they're rats because they won't stop barking, alerting the ghost to his car. You believe the look on the cop's face? Your wife, she's dead. Yeah, I know. Fucking ghost. She wouldn't shut the fuck up. I told her a million times, shut the fuck up. You're alerting the ghost to my fucking whereabouts. And not to be fucking undone, he whacks the fucking dogs. Because they're barking. And to me, the funniest fucking thing, I mean, it's horrible. He killed dogs. He killed his wife. Cannibalism. He bit his sister on the cheek. They charged him with fucking cannibalism. Oh, my God. You know, Matt Sam DiStefano was fucking nuts. This guy takes the fucking cake. Oh, my God. Oh, Christ. What a fucking nut job. If you don't buy that story, look it up for yourself. There's some reports of it. Just, you know, you read all kinds of shit. Certain things are funnier than others, and that's a fucking doozy. Jesus Christ. And they were worried about Sam Giancana and Mad Sam DiStefano getting a little reckless. This motherfucker was out killing pirates and demons. Oh, God. So I was going to do, I know I've advertised this a bunch of times, that I was going to do the Scumbag of the Week, but I have a special Scumbag of the Week next week. And the reason why I'm skipping it today is because I think Scumbag of the Week is going to be a little bit fucking more in depth. I mean, fuck, Tekashi 6ix9ine could be Scumbag of the Week. But I want to save that for next week, only because it's going to be sort of an in-depth Scumbag of the Week. And I just want to give it more time. So what we're going to talk about now is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And we're not talking about exactly what happened. We're talking about the politics of it all, what set it up, and everything in between. And next week, we will come back, obviously, with a biographical topic on a gangster. So what we all know about St. Valentine's Day, what we know about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, pretty much we all know what happened, but a lot of people probably don't know the full reasons behind it, or the planning of it that was involved in it. And it's truly one of the most awe-inspiring mob hits in American history. At the time, Al Capone, and really at the time it was Capone and Johnny Torrio were warring with the Irish Northsiders, specifically during Prohibition. The leader of the Irish Northsiders would eventually be George Bugs Moran, but at the time Jaime Weiss was kind of running things. But how did they get to the point where war was the only option? So as prohibition began, the Irish North Siders took over control of the entire north side of Chicago. That control consisted of distilleries and breweries, and in attaining those things, it ended up giving the North Siders really a monopoly on the control of booze, and to further ensure control over the local supply of anything. So, Capone and Torrio would need portions of that to help supply what they were doing, but the Irish North Siders weren't going to let them do that. And at the time, the problem was that the Torrio only had control of moonshine and bottom dollar gut rot liquor. So really the cheap shit that nobody really wanted. Torrio and Capone wanted more control, but they were very limited in their options. To make matters worse and perhaps more contentious, the Irish North Siders began to control the gambling rackets in the area and began to victimize the neighborhood, so shaken down and stuff like that. So Dan O'Bannon ends up sort of entering the scene, and he had a lot of power, especially in the political machine in Chicago. The fact that he was warring with the Italians, too, made things tough for Johnny Torrio. O'Bannon would get involved in election fraud, which would give him and the Irish North Siders a ton of power to wield. And the Irish North Siders would then begin to feed the poor, donate to orphanages, further pushing them in good faith with the public. And it was simply a PR move. If they could help somebody out, they were going to. Anything to make themselves look more appealing, they would do. They would hire the unemployed. They would loan money to those in need, obviously for probably some extortion rate. And just look at them like Robin Hood, and just as a fucking example. And what Torrio really wanted was a cut. He didn't want the North Side to control everything. He didn't want a monopoly. So while the North Side was doing all the shit talking combined with O'Bannon's purse strings into the city's political machine, O'Bannon ends up getting approached to sell a portion of the breweries to the South Side, sort of evening it up. We're all making money, and there's just no way. He outright refused to get involved, outright refused to deal. And so what Johnny Torrio does is he arranges a meeting between Al Capone and Dan O'Bannon to try to reach a peaceful accord. But every time O'Bannon was called to a meeting, he would just be totally racist. He called Capone a wop, a dago, a guinea, a greaseball, and just treated them with zero respect. And the other problem was that O'Bannon, on the sly, was hijacking shipments that belonged to the South Side, and he'd sell them right back to them for a huge profit. Capone knew what was going on. Torrio knew what was going on. They just couldn't prove it. O'Bannon just wasn't a gangster, but he was also insulated by the cops, protected by them, protected by politicians. He would throw big banquets for politicians, so they really had a lot of power and a lot of control. Then in 1924, Northside Distillery was robbed with help from the police as they raided this warehouse on basically O'Bannon going to them and giving them a kickback, and the police helped them steal it, and it was $100,000 of whiskey that were stolen. Eventually, O'Bannon would switch sides, and then he would fuck over Johnny Torrio, and we've talked about that even just recently. So go back and look at Johnny Torrio or Dan O'Bannon, and you'll hear in depth of how he fucked over Johnny Torrio. And ultimately, they would end up getting even with O'Bannon by killing him. So Jaime Weiss and Bugs Moran would end up taking over the Irish Northsiders and pretty much would go to war with Johnny Torrio by attempting to kill Al Capone. Capone would survive that hit, one of many hits. And Moran would then further go on to kidnap one of Capone's bodyguards. He would torture him for a couple of days, and then they dumped his body on the streets. Following that, Weiss and the Northsiders would go after the Jenna brothers, who were aligned with Torrio and Capone. The Jenna brothers, who we have also talked about on this show, would then be killed by Moran and the Northsiders, and Capone and the Northsiders would end up splitting up those rackets, one of the only times that they agreed on anything. With the Northsiders winning the war and with Torrio being really kind of pushed out of the rackets and Capone completely on the defensive at the time, the Northsiders just began to expand and close out really the outfit from organized crime. The Northsiders would once again try to kill Capone in a hail of gunfire, but he would also survive that. Capone would then attempt to call a truce and peace would be set. That's when Al Capone begins plotting. Capone would really start it off by having Jaime Weiss and 6 of his associates whacked, and the death of Weiss effectively put Moran in charge, and both sides would go toe-to-toe, battle for battle, for a couple of months before a meeting would be set. At this meeting, Capone complained to Moran that the shooting was making headlines, that they're fighting over money and that there was enough money to go around and they just needed to stop. And Moran agrees in principle, but I think it's safe to say that Capone really had his own kind of plans on the back end, as did Moran. And what Moran really does is he starts to rip off Capone's shipments, and Capone's just livid with it. Capone, as a response to Moran robbing his shipments, burns Moran's dog track to the ground. In a retributive sort of thing, Moran burns down Capone's dog track, but what he does is he decapitates the dogs first, puts their heads on sticks so that Capone can see them, which absolutely drove him fucking nuts, as Capone was a lifelong dog lover. Then Moran would execute close allies of Capone who were union leaders and important to Capone in his rackets, and that was it for Capone. All bets were off, and he was going to kill all of them. He was just done. So on February 4th of 1929, 4 men dressed as police officers entered the North Sider's garage. They ordered all 6 of the North Siders against the wall. They claimed it was an investigation. As soon as they lined them up against the wall, Tommy guns get pulled out and they get mowed down. Frankie Tight-Lips Gusenberg briefly survived the hit, but then as he's dying in a hospital bed, refused to even name who the shooters were. Bugs Moran was actually supposed to be there, but he was actually running late, and as he arrived late, he saw the police car outside the garage and said, nah, fuck this shit, we're not going in there. And the crux of the plot, which was sort of ingenious, was Moran was told that a huge liquor shipment that had been stolen, which was being supplied by the Detroit Purple Gang, was coming to the warehouse, and they needed to make sort of operations to go and pick it up. And the fact that Moran knew that the Detroit Purple Gang was tight with Capone sort of verified the information. So Moran saw it as a chance once again to rip off Al Capone. The Gusenberg brothers were supposed to drive the truck up to Detroit to go pick up the stolen shipment of booze. And so the final straw for Capone, really, at the end of the day, and for greenlighting those murders, was over the attempted murder of Jack McGurn. Moran also had 2 members of the Union Siciliano whacked. Patsy Orlardo and Antonio Lombardo were whacked. And then Moran does something even worse. He starts moving in Capone's territory. So there's all this stuff that Bugs Moran did. I mean, I think history will look back. He's a pretty tough fucking guy and didn't tolerate any nonsense. And so with the hit on Jaime Weiss and the hit of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Moran lost a lot of guys. And while he was still sort of able to keep his territory, he really lost a lot of power. I think it proved to the streets that Capone wasn't going to play. And Moran eventually begins to lose more and more territory. He begins to lose more power, ends up doing several stints in prison before he turns into a bank robber. That's what he did the last couple of years of his life. He actually left organized crime in general and became a bank robber. And he went from one of the wealthiest gangsters in Chicago ever to just really not having shit. In 1957, he would be arrested for bank robbery in Ohio, which would send him to prison, and he would die in prison of lung cancer. And that's exactly why the St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened. There was a lot of stuff going on at the time, but as you can see with Al Capone, I mean, we talk all the time on this show that Al Capone really wasn't mafia. He was a gangster, and there's a difference, and there is a big difference. But the reality is just because Al Capone wasn't like a card-carrying member of the mafia, so to speak, in the way he behaved, it doesn't make him any less tough of a guy. Al Capone did not fuck around. He didn't fuck around in that situation. And, you know, I also think on the flip side of that, you can't say that Bugsy Moran was soft either, because he took it to Capone's ass for a long time. And that's why the St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened. And that really is the one thing that happened. Now, there would be other things like in the late 40s to the early 40s that would happen. There would be warring. But that really also was the highlight of Al Capone's career. Shortly after that, Al Capone, ends up the tax evasion charges, goes to prison, gets syphilis, and starts doing the fucking farting shit that we talked about at the beginning of this show. The nasty causes of syphilis and stuff. But that was really the highlight of Al Capone's career right there. And it wasn't shortly after all of that Capone was no longer relevant. And it also symbolizes sort of the end of the gangster era in Chicago as far as what it would become, which was more mafia-oriented, more of a semblance to New York as far as look and the way that they operated. It was a different time period. You know, Prohibition was a big thing. And I always kind of wonder what Al Capone would have become had he not had syphilis and had the farting shits or whatever the fuck it is that this movie portrayed him to have. We're never going to know. We're never going to know exactly the extent of what Al Capone could have come, because he died at a relatively young age. And, things are, things in Chicago were never the same. They were a little different. And, there we go. All right, yeah, so there you go, Al Capone farting in the movie. But no, I mean, Al Capone could have been a lot of different things, and I think it would have been interesting historically to see how the transition would have been from the 1930s Prohibition gangster to the mafia. It would have been interesting, but we're probably never going to know. All right, so, yes, next week we are going to do a big scumbag of the week. We're probably going to have several scumbags of the fucking week next week. So all that being said, we will be back next week with an all-new show. For those who donate, thank you. I got a lot of bills to pay off with all this new podcast shit. So every little inch helps. $1 here, $1 there, everything helps. Believe me, I'm not getting rich. If I was getting rich, you'd see me doing fucking 30 shows a fucking week. But for those that do take the time to contribute, I appreciate it, and I thank you. For those who continue to support the page, thank you very much. For those who continue to send me messages, seeing how I am, or just to say hello, I appreciate it. Without all of you, none of this could be possible. So all that being said, we're going to get out of here for this week, and we will be back next week with the same show and the same sort of things. So thanks a lot, everybody, and we will see everybody next week.